now, we would like to invite Honorable Tuan Loke Siu Phoon to start the press conference for this afternoon.
Thank you. Very good afternoon to everyone. First of all, I'd like to welcome Minister Corbin Wan, Minister of Transport for Singapore, to Malaysia. As all of you know, that Minister Koh is part of the Singapore delegation to attend the annual Leadership Summit to be held tomorrow. So before we start the summit, of course, I had a bilateral meeting with Minister Koh just now for almost 45 minutes. We had a very good discussion on some of the issues. And of course, this press conference is called to update the media on some of the outstanding issues that we have resolved. I'm sure most of you will know that last Saturday, we have issued a joint statement to announce the way forward in terms of Seletar Airport. Both of us have agreed that Singapore side has withdrawn the ILS approach to Seletar. Likewise, Malaysia has suspended indefinitely in terms of our restricted area over Pasir Gudang. And that will enable aircraft and airlines to fly back to Seletar using the visual approach. And with that note, of course, we are happy to say that Firefly will resume their operations to Singapore, in particularly flying to Seletar beginning 21st of April this month. Of course, besides Firefly, the other Malaysian airline who is interested to fly to Seletar is Malindo. They have likewise applied to the airport authorities in Singapore to fly to Seletar as well. So hopefully that more flights will be resumed in the near future. In the spirit of bilateral relations, I think this is good for our cooperation and the way forward. On the same note, both sides have also agreed to set up a high-level working committee to review the LOA, operational letter of agreement between Malaysia and Singapore, which was signed in 1974. So there's a high-level committee to review that agreement over the management of airspace in southern Johor. So I think both of us have discussed just now, and we will set periodical meetings and some timelines and terms of reference to move things forward. And we are hopeful that this review will bear fruits. And this is, of course, very high in the priority of Malaysian government to review that air traffic management over southern Johor. And we thank Minister Corbin Wan for agreeing that this review will be done according to our agreement as well as to the schedule that we will lay out in the next couple of weeks. So with that, I would like to call Minister Corbin Wan to say a few words.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and members of the media. Thank you for spending the next 1 hour with us. My delegates and I just flown in about 1.5 hours ago, and we are so close by, and as close neighbors, we should always cooperate with one another. Excellency and I issued a joint statement over the weekend, which you had read and reported on them. And I thought I'll just give some brief comments to give context to what it was all about. You may not know, but Seletar Airport was actually a very small British military airport. A very old airport located in the north of Singapore, just opposite Pasir Gudang, across the Johor Straits. But over the years, it has evolved into a civilian airport and handling medical evacuation flights and some airplanes for MRO services, that means maintenance, repairs, and overhaul, and some private jets. It is a tiny airport serving around 24 flights a day, so it's really tiny. Given its location, flights coming or leaving for the north fly over Pasir Gudang within minutes of landing or departure. Seletar Airport is what we call a visual airport. In other words, the pilots land when they can see the runway. Should they not be able to sight the runway, such as during bad weather, aircrafts would not be able to land. Last December, CAAS, that's the Singapore Civil Aviation Authority, published a flight procedure for ILS, or Instrument Landing System, at Seletar Airport. This had been put in place at the request of Firefly. The ILS procedure would have allowed pilots to land under all weather conditions, even when there is low visibility. But there were some objections from the Malaysian Civil Aviation Authority. But after several rounds of discussions to understand each other's concerns and needs, both ministries have now reached a win-win outcome. So first, CAAS has withdrawn the ILS procedure since Saturday. Second, CAAM has suspended the RA over Pasir Gudang indefinitely. So with this, as indicated by Excellency Minister Lok, we are now able to look forward to Firefly's commencement of services at Seletar Airport. Third, CAAS will continue to work with CAAM to develop an alternative, a GPS-based instrument approach procedures for Seletar Airport. So now that we have withdrawn ILS, we will continue to look at alternative, and both sides agree that I think a GPS-based approach might be more relevant in this case. This is in place of the ILS procedure that Singapore has withdrawn. We will introduce GPS-based instrument approaches from both the north over Pasir Gudang and south over Singapore Island. This is because airplanes take off and land into the wind, and with northeast and southwest wind directions at different times of the year, we need both approaches. This is the issue which we will now finalize now that the issue of ILS and RA is resolved, and we expect to publish the procedures very soon. This will enhance safety for flights using the Seletar Airport. Both Minister Lok and myself also discussed the rapid growth of civil aviation in our region. Our airports, both KLIA as well as Changi, are experiencing significant growth of demand in air travel to both our countries. For example, the Singapore-KL route is already the busiest in the world. That is why our airports are expanding to cope with this growth. Changi Airport, for example, is building Terminal 5 and a third runway. KL International Airport has also been rapidly expanding. Airspace management in this region has to meet these challenges of ensuring both safety and efficiency. The current airspace management arrangement has served the region and both countries very well. But we have to make sure that it continues to sustain the safe and sustainable growth of civil aviation in the region. A high-level committee, co-chaired by both Singapore Permanent Secretary of Transport and Malaysia's SecGen of Transport, has been set up to review the existing airspace arrangement, under which provision of air traffic services over southern Peninsular Malaysia has been delegated to Singapore. Malaysia has expressed its wish to take over control of air traffic services provision in the airspace concerned. I had quite earlier this year explained to Minister Lok that the current arrangement was brokered by ICAO at a 1973 Regional Air Navigation meeting. It was agreed upon by states in the region and approved by the ICAO Council. Minister Lok stressed that the review was important to Malaysia. I assure him that Singapore would approach the review with an open mind, bearing in mind the many stakeholders involved and the critical need to ensure safety and efficiency in a very busy airspace. With goodwill and compromise, I'm sure that a win-win solution which does not undermine each other's core interests can be found. In addition to aviation issues, Singapore and Malaysia have many other bilateral transport cooperation projects. Given the heavy causeway traffic, this is an especially important priority area. The RTS link, when completed, will make a significant difference to commuters' experience, being able to transport up to 10,000 passengers per direction per hour. Given the heavy investment required for the project, Malaysia has requested for a 6-month suspension of the project to enable it to review the key parameters of the project. Both our respective Attorney Generals and officials are working towards a supplementary agreement to effect such a suspension. We will approach this issue as we did for the suspension of the high-speed rail project with goodwill and reasonable accommodation. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. May I open to the floor right now? Yes, you. Thank you.
Hi, Minister Safifa from CNA. What were some of the considerations that were taken when deciding that Singapore will withdraw the ILS and that Malaysia will suspend indefinitely the restricted area of the hospital?
Well, of course, on our side, we have opposed to the ILS to be imposed over Pasir Gudang. Of course, that is all water under the bridge right now. We have voiced our concern to the Singapore side, and my Singapore counterpart have agreed to withdraw that ILS. Of course, that will be enable flights to resume to Seletar based on a visual approach, which we have mentioned just now. I think we have voiced the concern, and we would like to leave it at that. I think we want to move forward from now on. And what is important is to Malaysia is that Singapore has also agreed in terms of setting up a high-level committee, which we have mentioned just now, and that is to review the LOA 1974 over the management of airspace.
I think the larger approach is one of, as close neighbors, how do you handle each other's relationship? And we have always taken the approach, and I'm sure Malaysia too, of one of prosper thy neighbor, that your success will have spillover positive benefits for us, just as if we fail as an economy or as a country, I'm sure it will have negative spillover to the other side. And having taken such an approach, or underpinned by such an approach, then I think bilateral relations will always try to look for common ground. How can we, there will always be problems, then how do you find, with some imaginations and goodwill, some win-win solutions? And in this instance, I think we found such a win-win situation.
Hi, Ministers. Ruston from Straits Times. Wanted to ask, what is the difference between the GPS instrument approach and the ILS system? And Mr. Kaw, you mentioned that this will be published, expected to be published very soon. When you have a more certain date for it? Thank you.
We have to discuss. I think both regulators have to sit down, and in fact, they have started discussing. And once that is settled, we should be able to publish it. I personally don't see major obstacles to finalizing this. But to answer your technical question of what's the difference between ILS and GPS, there are actually many alternative instrumentation procedures. ILS is one, GPS is another. Some procedures are more conducive in the sense that most aeroplanes would be equipped to handle such instruments, but other aeroplanes with other procedures may not be so well equipped. But since ILS has some difficulties, we think GPS-based is a great possibility. And but it is quite technical. If you want more accurate, authoritative answers, our regulators are here. I'm quite sure they will be able to fit you in. Yeah. But key point, I think, is the political one, that instrument procedure enhances safety And I think that is the key objective. I mean, I flew in 2 hours ago on Malaysian Airlines, and on the screen, very often they flash out their vision statement that your safety, I mean commuter, your safety is our key priority. Seletar Airport and Singapore share such a vision. Yeah.
Hello, Sarah from UK. I just wondering about the RTS.
Sorry, where are you? Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
RTS suspension, right? Do Malaysia need to pay compensation to Singapore, or what are you heading towards the suspension? Are Malaysia going to terminate the current agreement and renegotiate, or what is the direction?
Well, first of all, it's not a termination. It is a suspension of 6 months on the current agreement. Of course, that needs to be worked out by the EG chambers in terms of the supplementary agreement to suspend for 6 months. And yes, there is some cost involved, but I cannot tell you what is the exact cost right now, because that is to be determined by the review, and the AG chambers will draft the supplementary agreement, and more details will be announced once we finalize that.
YB Fidas Azir from Astrawadi. About the high-level committee, you said that it's our desire to take back our airspace. Can you tell us why do Malaysia take back our airspace management? Is it possible?
Of course, first of all, that is our sovereign airspace. That has been a long-standing issue, and we wish that we can manage our own airspace. That is our desire. And we think that after 45 years of dedicated that airspace to Singapore, it is high time right now for us to review the agreement. And we are ready in terms of technical readiness. We have invested over the years a lot of money in terms of our equipments and our air traffic control readiness. And as you know that we are building up a new KL ATC as well, which will be based in Sepang. I think with that facilities and equipments, we think that we are ready to manage our own airspace. So that is to answer your questions why that is top in our priority in terms of reviewing that agreement with Singapore.
I'm Shobhi from Singapore. Can I have a question for Mr. Koh? This is basically, what about the review for the impact that you will have, implications that you will have for Singaporeans then? Does it mean, we are working towards the direction of not having to manage the airspace on behalf of Malaysia? Thanks.
As I said, airspace management is a complicated matters, because knowing the aeroplane speed, and many countries with close borders, within minutes you are into a different airspace. And that's why globally there are fewer FIRs, flight information regions, controlled by air traffic controller than countries. So supposing, let's say there are 300 countries, doesn't mean there are 300 FIRs. There are much less. Meaning many countries find it logical, safer, and more efficient for airspace to be, in a way, outsourced, to some other parties. Yeah. Technically, I mean, at a, I'm sure it will happen at some stage. Probably not during my political career, but at some stage, the whole world probably needs only one FIR authority with satellites and so on. It's possible. And who knows, it may be even run by AI. So that is, if you stretch the argument. To us, the key point is the airspace is there. The traffic growth is rapid and huge. How do you squeeze in as much flights into this limited airspace as efficiently as possible and as safely as possible? Yeah. So key point, that I think is that must be the key outcome. And indeed, that is ICAO's priority and objective. And they look at airspace proposals always from this angle. Of course, bearing in mind sovereignty of airspace of the countries involved. But the underlying priority must always be, does it make it more efficient? Do the changes make it safer? So we will approach it from that angle. But as I said in my opening remarks, that we will negotiate in good faith. We keep an open mind, knowing that Malaysia's aspirations and legitimate concerns, that this is their sovereign space. I personally have some idea how we can approach this with, so that your core interests are protected, and I hope Malaysia will also take into account some of our core interest needs, which is Changi Airport. Changi Airport is a very busy airport, you know, and if procedures are instituted, then hopefully we should be able to continue to support this growth. You see, if you project a little bit, a few years down the road, ASEAN, I think as one economy, could easily be in the top 4 or 5 largest economies in the world. It is coming. I can see it happening. And there is enough space for everybody to do whichever sectors. And if you look at civil aviation sectors, almost certainly the largest, fastest growth is in ASEAN, and of which Malaysia, Singapore, together with Thailand, Indonesia, will make up a huge part of that. The question is, how do you take advantage of this potential huge increase in traffic? Malaysia has a lot of capacity to be able to tap into this huge increase of the pie. Singapore, frankly speaking, very limited. You know Singapore, our size, and Changi Airport, the current development, Terminal 5, third runway, this is it. This is our maximum. Whereas we fly into KLIA, and you see huge tracts of land. If you need to expand more, and I'm quite sure you will expand more, build more runway, you just build it. More terminal, you just build it. And to tap this growth. Your growth is good for me, because if more travelers are attracted to KL, we know some of them may then make side trips down to Singapore. So that was what I meant by, I think we can always forge win-win, and if the motive is clear, prosper thy neighbor, we can achieve such a positive, mutually beneficial outcome, not just for Malaysia and Singapore, in fact, for the whole region. We are looking at, for example, travelers coming to Singapore, 70% of them will go to some other ASEAN countries after Singapore. So that's how it is never, a zero-sum game. Actually, in life, there are very few zero-sum games. Maybe courting a spouse is a zero-sum game. It's either you marry me or you marry him. But in life, in many other matters, economic affairs and so on, you can, with some creativity and goodwill, you can always forge some win-win solution, as I did with Excellency Minister Lok over these Seletar matters.
Okay, any more questions? Yes.
Good evening, Kenneth from Today. Singapore and Malaysia this morning mutually suspended their overlapping port limits. So my question is for both ministers. What is next for Singapore and Malaysia on the maritime boundary issue?
The suspension is pending an agreement between the government of Malaysia and the government of the Republic of Singapore on the maritime boundary delimitation in the area surrounding Johor Bahru port limits of Tanjung Piai, as well as Singapore port limits of Tuas, which is yet to be agreed by both countries. Of course, on this particular issue, it will be handled by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of both countries. We are the implementer. So that's why when both foreign ministers have agreed to suspend the current port limit, we implemented it, and we have get it done last night, and by way of a gazette of a suspension of that particular earlier gazette.
Hi, Ministers. Amir from Channel News Asia. Recently, there's been news on the businesses between Singapore and Johor Bahru. There's a drop in tourism. Now that the RTS link has been suspended, how will this impact in the short term and in the long term?
Well, as I said, the RTS is not cancelled. Yes, of course, it's suspended for 6 months for us to review in terms of the scope and in terms of the cost of how to do it more efficiently, and as well as to lower down the fare. Because under the current agreement, we found that the fare to be determined, or the fare to be charged to the commuters or the passengers, is on the high side. I think both sides agreed that we need to work together in terms of lowering the ticket price, in order to encourage more people to use the RTS once it's completed. But that, of course, it will take a few years to complete. We can't get it done overnight. Of course, even in the original agreement, that is supposed to be completed in 2024. That is about 5 years from now. So it is not going to happen overnight. But in the meantime, of course, we know that the congestions in the causeway is, of course, is bad. Both sides, we try to review our processes at the immigration level. I conveyed to Minister KHAW just now that we hope that both government can look into ways and means to make it easier to solve the congestions. Of course, it's not going to be easy. There are a lot of technical issues involved on how to solve the congestions. At the same time, the Malaysian government has also put in our request to Singapore in terms of increasing our frequency in terms of the shuttle, Tebrau shuttle, the train services between Johor Bahru and Woodlands. So if that can be increased, that maybe helps a bit in terms of the congestions. But we will work together closely in terms of looking for approaches and ways of how to solve the congestions. And we know that that is a major issue of why there is some drop in terms of Singaporeans coming over to Johor Bahru. Of course, we pay a very high attention to that. Of course, we welcome Singaporeans to come over to Johor Bahru, and that is important to the Johor Bahru services sector. And we will definitely look for ways in terms to increase the efficiency at the causeway.
Okay, we take the last question from the media. Thank you.
Any more? Yes, one more there. Please.
Sorry. Wait. Excuse me. Okay, hi. 不好意思，我是新加坡8频道电新闻的记者，能不能请两位就是以中文来回答，就是谈一谈有关于这个就是领空方面，就是现在的这样的一个安排，我们就是你们是基于怎么样的一些考量？接下来我们会预计会出现怎么样的一个情况？
I was wondering whether we can take it offline because there are non-Mandarin speakers here. We can take it offline.
We can take it offline later.
Yeah.
After the press conference, we can interview both of us.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Because that is in Mandarin. If not, I will. Is there any closing remarks from Minister? You have any closing remarks before we end the press conference?
I'm looking forward to a very nice dinner with Minister Lok later. He promised me a good meal, and I know it will be discharged.
Yeah. Well, once again, I'd like to thank Minister KHAW for flying up to Malaysia, even though that he's still unwell actually. He had an accident at home 2 months ago. So I'd like to state that I had a very good working relationship with Minister KHAW. We actually worked a lot behind the scene. We had a lot of discussions over the last 2-3 months. And I think that resulted in the win-win situation that we can look forward for mutually benefit a relationship that we are committed to have more collaboration and to work together even closer in order to achieve benefits for both countries and both people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sure.
Thank you.